Well, here we go, and happy football season, everybody. Brent Martineau, Austen Lane, in on a Tuesday of football week. And Trevor Lawrence, the Jacksonville Jaguars, head to South Florida week 1 on CBS 47, and that takes place Sunday afternoon at 1 o'clock. The football season begins on Thursday. The college football season already over for some, like Florida Gator fans and Florida State fans. We'll get to that as well. And even Trevor's old Clemson Tigers facing a little bit of adversity to start the year. But a lot on the shoulders of number 16 and maybe a lot on the shoulders of the Jaguars to keep football fans around here happy. Hey, everybody, and I hope you had a fantastic holiday weekend. Brent Martineau here in studio. We'll be joined by Austen Lane in Las Vegas in just a bit. Oh, didn't you know I had my sunglasses on still? There we go. Hopefully you're ready to go. You get all your futures in. You get your fantasy football team built. You're ready to rock and roll and have your plans. Spent the time with the family the last couple of days and said, see you later. We'll see you in February, hopefully late February, for the Jacksonville Jaguars after parades and everything else. Maybe it's that kind of year for the Jags. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. How about a 1-0 start? That would be pretty nice for Jacksonville as well. We'll get to talk about the Dolphins and the Jags, of course. That game we will break down. We've talked a little bit about it, but we'll really get into it, of course, coming up. And, we'll talk Florida State. We'll talk Florida. We'll talk the college football weekend. Pretty fascinating one. Shame on you again, DirecTV, for taking the eyeballs away from college football and giving people what they want. Because of your business squabbles. We've got that going on too. And the chase for the guy who's supposed to eat dog, you know what, out of a red Solo cup because the Florida State Seminoles lost. Hope he puts whipped cream on it. There is that. Looks like we might have Austen coming up soon. I'm not sure if he can hear me or if we can hear him, but let's try it out. What the heck, Austen? How we doing? Yeah, we can't hear him. So, Rob, this is Rob's first foray into the Las Vegas Austen Lane. So we'll give him a little bit of time to figure that out, and then we'll get Austen in. Be patient. We'll get to you. Hope you had a good weekend out there, Austen Lane, as the training continues for an October fight, and a big one coming up on October 19th for Austen Lane. Hey, here's the deal. Jaguars got back in the facility yesterday. They had a nice 3 days off, and now it's go time, right? They put a bunch of work in over the last 5-6 months, all the different storylines from Shad Khan and his expectations to contract extensions to the hardened training camp to really what I think is now the most important storyline for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and that is they are healthy. The Jags are a healthy football team. Doug Peterson said yesterday that they will have everybody available on their 53-man roster for Sunday's game against the Miami Dolphins. That is a huge win just to start the year. It doesn't go in the column, but it certainly helps you get more W's in the column. The longer you can keep that going for the Jacksonville Jaguars, we know that. It's league is really about attrition at some times, and it's about luck as much as it is about being a good football team. We think the Jags have a good football team. Daniel Thomas is the only one that's still got to work his way back, but there's a lot of confidence that he'll be able to go. Jags special teamer and add some depth at the safety position. And then who will roll out on that defense? Where will they roll out on that defense? We get the debut of Eric Armstead on that defensive front, formidable front for the Jacksonville Jaguars. How much will that pass rush depth be questioned, especially against a Miami team that's going to try to run fast and go up tempo, all those different things, put a little heat on the Jags, especially early on. Make sure you're in condition because that's always a big deal in week number 1. This is a good Miami Dolphins football team. I think this is really one of the more fun season openers the Jaguars have had since my time here, going back 16 years. And I hadn't even looked it up. I was going to look it up, and I forgot to, but we were doing it just off the cuff the other day. I think Ty and I were doing it, and the Nick Foles game, you know, the anticipation, the big contract, the helicopters, the everything else, and that debut against the Chiefs was fascinating, right? Because of all the storylines and also Foles being, at that time, the highest priced free agent believe the Jaguars had signed, and maybe in terms of guaranteed money, whatever it was, that would have been 2019. So, you know, that was anticipated. That was a heavily anticipated one, but I think that was 19. So that would have been, 5 years ago or something like that. Maybe it was 20. No, it was 19. Must have been 19. But I'll look it up anyway. But this is the most anticipated from a good game standpoint. Jags have other good opponents in here, but they are good. And to have this be the season opener and really that whole front part of the schedule, which is filled with playoff teams, the Jags have their hands full. All right, I think we might get to Austin. Then we're going to try it. I think I heard him a little bit there in Las Vegas. Did you have a good weekend?
I had a great weekend, man. Yeah,
there you are.
It was chock full of sparring and punching and kicking and everything, but overall, a really good weekend.
No winning bets?
No, didn't place one bet, Brent, and thank God I did, because Florida State last night was the talk of the town around Las Vegas of, what was it, minus 16.5, I want to say?
Is that what it was? Is that what ended up? I know it was around 17 at one point, and then minus 16.5, but people were talking about it in Vegas?
Oh, that was all the buzz, at home. It's a must-win game. The college football playoff's still alive if they win this one. And needless to say, yeah, glad I didn't place that bet last night.
Yeah, you and, well, maybe other people made the other side of the bet. Jason Hamby's starting to pound his chest because he had UCF winning the game. He's an I told you so guy. Now I got to ask him if he put any money on it, I told him, because I told you so guys in front of a microphone or whatever, because they don't tell you so when they're wrong. But if his wallet says that he made the right play, then good for him. But, yeah, we're going to talk about Florida State. It's a mess. I mean, and really, it's crazy. The psyche of the psyche of football fans here in Jacksonville, here in Northeast Florida, now rely on the Jaguars, Austin. I mean, it's a big deal that the Jags get off to a good start. They deliver, and I don't know if one game is going to be the start. I mean, I can already hear the moaning and groaning next Sunday afternoon if the Jags lose to the Dolphins. I mean, there's no harm in losing to the Dolphins in week one. On the road. I mean, Dolphins are a very good football team. Like, I don't think that's like, oh, season's over. How do they lose that game? Like, it's not like Florida State being 0-2 or the look of what just happened in Gainesville and how it feels. But I think football fans need a little bit of a pick-me-up around here, and the Jags, it's all on their shoulders right now.
No, for sure. And listen, I mean, depending how much you want to read into the lines here with this Jaguars-Miami game, but this morning I checked it out, and it was, -3 for Miami, which I think gives a lot of props to the Jacksonville Jaguars of just how I think, bookies are respecting the Jaguars. Because, I mean, I think a lot of people thought, okay, well, it's the Miami Dolphins, this high-powered offense. How can the Jags stop them? In Miami, like, it's got all the makings of the Jaguars to get, blown out by at least 7, by at least 10. And people, I think, on the national level aren't really expecting that, which I was surprised about, because I think a lot of people right now are scared of this Miami Dolphins offense. So I was definitely surprised to see that. And like you mentioned to start the show off, when you have a 100% healthy team, that's a rarity, knock on wood, that can kind of maintain the entire year. Obviously Dewey's out, but how big of a loss is that maybe on special teams? But in terms of a starting caliber player, you're not really missing much with him because you have other guys that can take his mantle. So I'm a little surprised of the spread, number one, but also it makes a lot of sense to me because I think the Nash people kind of think what we think, that this Jaguars team could be pretty damn good this year.
Yeah, that's a good indicator right there. You're right. I thought it would be a little bit more. I hadn't even checked the line because we'll do some picks later in the week, but I thought it would. I didn't think it would be insane because I don't think people really trust the Miami Dolphins fully either. But I thought it would maybe be like something around 4.5. Like I wouldn't have been surprised because the thing about it with the Dolphins is they're really dangerous in terms of how explosive they can be, and they can kind of run you out of the building type of team. Like if things do go well. So if you think the Dolphins are going to win, like it's not going to probably be by 3. Like in my opinion, if you think the Dolphins are going to win, they're probably going to win. Win pretty handily. That's just at least my perception of the Dolphins, right? That's my feeling of it. But I do think there is this curiosity of how good are the Miami Dolphins. And they are without Bradley Chubb. They are getting a guy like Phillips back from a major injury. We don't really know. We'll find out tomorrow about Jalen Waddle and where he is in terms of his status. He's had the red jersey on all the camp. I got to believe he's fine and ready to go, but we'll see. And then, of course, you don't have Odell Beckham Jr. I don't think that's a huge part of it, but it's still a body and a name and everything else that could sway like a Vegas line. So I just simply asked this question because I don't know the answer. How good are the Miami Dolphins, in your opinion?
I mean, I still think the Dolphins are pretty damn good. And I mean, we talked about this last week a little bit. They've given their contract extension to Mike McDaniel as well, which kind of shows that
Yeah.
they have confidence in him, we broke this down last week and go back and listen to it. I mean, I always felt like he was a great locker room guy, and then most importantly, those players want to play for him. And I think that contract really shows that. How good are they? I mean, obviously on defense, they can be considered a liability. Yeah, you still have one of the best cornerbacks in the game. But that's just one position. They have given up points in the past, but once again, this is almost like a Big 12 team where all you got to do is score more points than your opponent. You're going to win. So I still think it's a team that deserves respect. I mean, is Tua a top 5, even a top 10 quarterback? I think that's up for debate, obviously. I think he's outside the top 10, but when you play with guys like Tyreek Hill, and we'll see with Jalen Waddle, and they have a backfield who is also explosive, you just see like what they have in terms of like their dogs, their elite talent, and how that matched up against the Jaguars. And the Jaguars have had problems with this in the past. The Jags have had problems covering, top receivers. I remember Devonta Adams, I think it was last year, 2 years ago, had like 11 receptions, 12 receptions in the first half. And then obviously had like a giant goose egg in the second half. But so I think, having that one receiver has always kind of cursed the Jags a little bit. And obviously when you talk about receiving running back out of the backfield as well, they have had problems in the past stopping that. This is a brand new defense. How is it going to translate? We'll see.
Yeah. By the way, the Jags did just name captains. That's been released. It's Trevor Lawrence, Josh Hines Allen, Evan Ingram, Foye Oluokun, and Logan Cook. So I can't say any of those are surprises. Just depends how many you wanted to go. The nice part about this football team is you got a lot you could pick from in the captain role. I mean, I think they've got a lot of players that you could put a C on, but no surprise here. You pay Trevor, you pay Josh. Those are captain kind of salaries. Logan's been terrific, maybe one of the most underrated players that's ever existed in Jacksonville, quite frankly, how good he is. And I know we don't talk about punters, but he's that good of a punter. And then Evan and Foye, so that's good for those guys. And I really like the Evan one, Austin. And I'm not a big captain guy. Like it good for those guys. Like I think it means something internally. It might even have more meaning internally than it does externally, right? Like we can't feel that, but you've been in those buildings. And I just said this last week. Yes. I went on this whole 20-minute thing about Evan Ingram where I said, I think this team kind of has fed off his personality, his edge, right? His the way he handles his business. So I like that 17, after what he's done the last couple of years, is kind of the guy that other players can look up to.
Yeah, I mean, with Evan, obviously, this is a guy that puts in the work day in, day out. He's always the first one on the field. We've seen Brenton Strange kind of like copy that now and also work with him and be one of the first guys on the field. So it does make a lot of sense from these captains. I wonder, like, Brent, will there be like a week-by-week captain as well if they're going to appoint? Because I think they had that last year.
They usually will do something like that, and I think Doug has employed that as well. So I would say yes. I don't think Doug spoke on it yet, but I would say yes. So we'll see if that's that's a cool nod too, right? Yeah, that's a cool thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good thing. Obviously, there's a couple more guys you can maybe name for a weekly basis. I mean, I think obviously he just got here, but Mitch Morse, I mean, he's going to have to be the anchor and a very important piece. Eric Armstead on the other side. Has to be an anchor and a very important piece. So yeah, I mean, I'm not mad at these captains whatsoever. I assume they were team voted. So if they're team voted, you're not gonna go against what those players in the locker room know because they see it day in and day out. So I trust that locker room. I trust who they've appointed, and it'd be cool if they could do like a weekly captain as well, just to kind of give a little more incentive of staying focused and keep working hard.
Yeah, I think they'll probably do that. Delphonic says, I know the rule is 6 captains, but it's not enforced. I don't know if I knew that. I've never really looked into it that much. He said the Dolphins have 8 captains, so it obviously isn't enforced if that is the case. But this would allow the Jags to have 5 and then that weekly rotation, which would make it 6. Makes some sense. Steve Boston says the game will be one of the trenches. The weapons the Dolphins have worry me, but Miami's offensive line has been a concern for their team, too. Under pressure hasn't been clutch. All right, and that's actually where I was going next. So thanks, Steve, for getting us into that. Because, Austin, I have this curiosity of course, the Jags feel like they got better in the pass rush. Their front should be pretty formidable, in my opinion. But Tua is a guy that gets the ball out very fast. He anticipates throws. That's kind of his game. That's the beauty of his game. They want to be able to do that. And I understand they have guys that can beat you deep and they can fly, but they also get it out quick, get it into those guys' hands, and make you try to miss. So what I was curious about, is this more of a defensive front game, which is what Steve is saying, or is this really more of a secondary game for the Jags to hold up, make him pump, hold, have some hesitation to be able to give the guys a chance to get home? Because if you're playing quick game, it's really tough to get home. I don't care how formidable you are.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of comes down to chicken or the egg, right? Because the defensive line helps the secondary helps the defensive line. So you can kind of go either way with it. But I'll say this much. We expect Trayvon Walker. We expect Joshua Hines-Allen to get home. Like, this is their job now. This is what expectations are, because they're that great of players. So I'm not worried about necessarily the pass rush. What I am worried about, though, is the secondary in terms of the motion and trying to stay with their guys, right? Because this is where the Dolphins, I think, can beat you more than anything. It's giving those looks where you see blown coverages, right, where guys are wide open. And if you're a quarterback, if you're Tua, all you need is 1-2 seconds to see a guy wide open. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to throw the ball to you. So that's the biggest thing. I think I'm going to key in more on the secondary, just because, once again, I think the edge can definitely win. We'll see what Eric Armstead looks like, but I feel like whether it's on the outside or the inside, I feel like he can win a little bit. And if that's the case, you have the guys up front who can get home, well, then it comes to the secondary to make sure they can do their job as well. So I'll be watching more of the secondary, no blown coverages, keeping track of the motions, all the wrinkles and everything, because this is how Mike McDaniel tries to beat you. It's not necessarily man on man, we're just going to run our routes. Like, they have the capabilities to do that with Tyreek Hill and if Jalen Waddle plays, but it's more of scheming these guys to get open. And by the way, they're already super elusive, super quick. So it's not like you have to scheme them too hard, but he loves to do that.
Yeah, and Steve says Darby held Hill to 1 catch last year. We'd sign up for that right now. If that's the case, I think the Jags have a really good chance to win the football game. And again, there was a formidable front for the Ravens. So listen, Steve, I'm not telling you you're wrong. I think it's a curiosity of which one is more important. And I know they go work hand in hand, all that stuff. But the bottom line is, if they can get sticky, which in the secondary, which is what they've been saying the secondary is all about, right? Making it challenging right off the rip, bring it to those receivers, be physical with those receivers, which is good if you can do it. It's bad against these two guys if you don't, because if they get a step on you, it's over. So, and there's a lot of stress then on the safeties. But if they can get sticky there, then you give your chance to that front to be able to do its thing. And I think the Jags front is certainly capable of doing its thing. I think the Jags, if you go like position by position, almost any game this year, I think the Jags will have a really good chance against whatever front they're facing. And I agree with you on the Miami front. They lost Robert Hunt. They've got some question marks there. The Jags should be able to get some if they can keep Tua to holding the football a little bit longer. So that's going to be really, from a defensive standpoint, that's probably the key to this football game. We're going to break down this game every which way possible this week. But just a quick flip to the other side, Austin. I know we're going to talk about the Jags defense a ton because of the matchup, and I get it. And it's a sexy matchup in that sense, right? I mean, anytime you play the Miami Dolphins, it's pretty wild with McDaniel, with Tua, with the speed they have in the backfield, and then obviously the wideouts. But to me, this game still comes down to Trevor Lawrence, Doug Peterson, and the offense. Like, I think the Jags defense can do okay, and they're still going to give up some against Miami. You've got to be able to score. You've got to be able to dictate play. That's something the Jags offense could not do a year ago. Your identity is an offensive football team. If the defense wants to join the party someday, that's fine. The Kansas City's defense was better than their offense last year in totality. It still didn't matter. Their defense wasn't the identity. It's still Mahomes. It's still Reed. It's still Kelsey. It's those guys. The Jags' identity needs to be their offense. Their $275 million quarterback, their Super Bowl winning coach, all the weapons that they do have. They need to, in my opinion, force that coming up on Sunday the way they've done in the preseason. That has to carry over, Austin. I think this is an offensive game for the Jags. That's where they've got to win this football game.
Well, yeah, it has to be, because to think that you're just going to rely on your defense to shut down Miami, like, we know that's realistically probably not going to happen. right? I mean, if the defense holds Miami at 20 points, more power to you. Ryan Nielsen's the next Bill Belichick. Let's go. But realistically, if you want to win this game, it might be a little bit of a track meet. Now, with that being said, I don't want to get into a track meet with the Miami Dolphins. I think a good way to beat this Dolphins team is to control the line of scrimmage and is to control the clock. And this is where Hank Bigsby, Travis Etienne, and this interior offensive line has to come up big, right? Because anytime you can keep Tyreek Hill and Tua off the field, the better. So the last thing you want to see, I feel like, with this Jaguars team is going 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, kind of like we've seen the past a little bit, because Miami's too good of offense just to give them 3 outs, 3 and outs, 3 and outs. So I agree with you. This is going to be an offensive-minded game, I think, from the Jaguars. And also, I think it's got to be a game where you got to establish that line of scrimmage. You have to establish the run, set up the play action, and really control the clock here for the Jaguars.
But speaking of Brian Thomas Jr., I wanted to bring that up. Man, what a game within a game. I don't know if Jalen Ramsey's going to travel Austin with Brian Thomas Jr. But Brian Thomas Jr., welcome to the NFL. You get number 5 across from you, one of the best corners in the league for the last 6-7 years. And that's a fun matchup to see. I mean, if he can do anything against Jalen Ramsey, that's going to infuse a heck of a lot of confidence into that young man, this team, and probably this fan base.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, especially, I can definitely visualize, too, where, Jalen, obviously one of the best cornerbacks in the league, but where he has made mistakes sometimes is where he underestimates the guy across from him in terms of speed on that go route. There's been a couple times where Jalen has been beat on go routes, and guess what? Brian Thomas Jr. can run a go route. So I'm definitely excited for Brian Thomas Jr. We'll see. We've been talking about what this Jaguars defense is going to look like. Well, what is the Dolphins going to look like? Are they gonna put Jalen on the one the entire time? Will he stay on one side like some teams do? I mean, we'll see there, but yeah, more than likely we're going to get a lot of Jalen Ramsey on Brian Thomas Jr., and it's going to be a great test for Brian Thomas Jr. And if it goes well, I feel like we've heard a lot about Neighbors. We've heard a little bit about Odunze, Marvin Harrison Jr. I always feel like Brian Thomas Jr. during this training camp, and maybe it's just, I haven't looked into it enough, but it feels like from the national perspective, he's been kind of the B-side in terms of the hype and everything of like what he could possibly do. And this could be a great coming out party for Brian Thomas Jr. if he does hit that go route at least one time.
Yeah, I think, and that's kind of the deal, right? He's had one big play each and every preseason game, obviously in a small sample. And don't you just feel that? Can he give you one play? I mean, really one play. And I'm not telling you that every game he's got to have one catch and he catches 17 balls this year. That's not it. But in this game in particular, one big play, maybe it's a few catches. I don't anticipate Brian Thomas Jr. having some 8-catch, 120-yard game in his debut against Jalen Ramsey and the Miami Dolphins. Again, I'm not saying Miami's going to travel Ramsey against him, but still, I mean, there's going to be that matchup at times, you would think. So my expectations are pretty low in this football game for Brian Thomas Jr., just as a debut anyway. And the Jags have a bunch of different options. They don't have to feed him the ball. And, of course, Ramsey on the other side. And I think we've been talking about this for weeks and mentioning it, and it's mentioned once again in the chat. I'm fine with BTJ taking Ramsey out of the game. Our other receivers will feast. I think there's an element to that where it's not just because it's Ramsey. They want the Gabe Davises and Brian Thomas Jr.'s to go down the field to open things up underneath for Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk, and even ETN out of the backfield. Now, you'd still like to hit those guys. So if they can hit them once or twice in this game and you have these big plays and you keep Miami's defense honest and that big play makes a difference, I mean, I think that's what I'm kind of looking for in this game from Brian Thomas Jr. because he's been able to deliver it so far in the preseason, Austin. I'd be okay with that. This isn't going to be like, hey, sign him up for fantasy football, but you just said something. If he does have a pretty productive game, whatever that might look like, and there's some loud moments in that game, I think you're exactly right. I think he's going to jump on the radar of everybody because he's been slowly building this thing ever since the start of camp. It got off to a slow start, and then it just keeps ticking up, ticking up, ticking up. It would be something if he explodes in week one. An explosion might just mean maybe it's a big touchdown catch or two or a 64-yard play. Whatever that looks like, I think you're right. He could get the attention of the league.
No, absolutely. And when it comes down to Brian Thomas Jr., we've been over this many times now. You don't have to be the 10 receptions, 100 yards per game kind of guy, because we have other guys that can take, that share as well. You have Christian Kirk, you have Evan Ingram, you have Gabe Davis. But if you can get that long ball once or twice to kind of, introduce yourself to the NFL, I'm all for it. If the stat line, Brent, is 3 receptions or 4 receptions for 85 or 90 yards, and it's, one of those plays is over 40, 50 yards, I'm happy with it, man. So, yeah, I think that's the beauty about being in this offense as opposed to being Marvin Harrison and being in Arizona, being Malik Neighbors and having to deal with Daniel Jones and literally no other wide receiver in New York, it seems like. It's the fact that I feel like a little pressure is off you now if you're Brian Thomas Jr., because you don't have to go out there and be the guy. You just got to go out there and do what you do.
Yeah, it's and doing what he does is really run, and the Jaguars will be trying to exploit some of that speed on Sunday against Miami Dolphins. There's so much talk about the Miami Dolphins speed. I think there's some speed with the Jacksonville Jaguars, too, that not as many people are talking about. ETN, explosive. Obviously, Brian Thomas Jr., Gabe Davis can make the big plays. And just the fact that Evan Ingram can beat you with his size and speed, and also Christian Kirk can run. I think people sleep on that part with Kirk, and he showed it in the New Orleans game last year. So maybe the story coming out of here is the Jags' speed isn't so bad. I think it's now, can the Jags' speed on defense keep up with the Miami Dolphins? That will be really the big part of it to watch for the Jags.
Welcome back to the Brent and Austen Show, streaming on the Action Sports Jax 24/7 network.
And welcome back here, everybody, to a Tuesday of the Brent and Austen Show. It's a game week in the NFL. We'll be down in South Florida. We go with the team on Saturday, and maybe we'll see some of you down there in Miami. Obviously, a quick flight or a short ride, not too bad a ride, at least, to be able to get to a game, and should be a heck of a football game. Probably a hot one down there in South Florida, as everybody knows, but Miami and Jacksonville should be used to that, and maybe some fireworks. And I'm looking forward to the offenses. And really the offense of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I was just looking at somebody, I think it was like Pro Football Focus, Jacksonville or something, had like the big-time throws of Trevor Lawrence last year. That stat's been out there for a while. But I was thinking this about Trevor as we welcome Austin Lane back in from Las Vegas as well. You'll just hear Austin, at least as of now. His Wi-Fi was a little spotty on the video, so we're just going the audio there out in Vegas. And Austin, I was thinking simply this. If he does cut down the fumbles, meaning Trevor Lawrence, which obviously has been a big problem. He has a lot more fumbles than anybody else in the National Football League, even Josh Allen. If he cuts down on that, there are a lot of other metrics that line up for Trevor that showcase he has a chance to be one of the elite quarterbacks if he just eliminates, I think, the fumbling mistakes, not necessarily turnovers in general, the fumbling mistakes. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, you can call it the fumbling mistakes. I'm going to call it more of not playing outside himself, trying to make things happen a little bit too much, right? And that could have been a combination of a lot of things last year. It could have been a combination of a lot of drop balls where he felt like, okay, well, I got to, it puts more pressure on him. It could be a combination of maybe some guys were running the right routes last year, a la Calvin Ridley. Maybe he felt more pressure to all right, I have to put it upon myself to do even more. That's what I'm looking at, is just playing within yourself. It's another year in this Press Taylor / Doug Peterson offense. It's another year now. You have Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, Travis Etienne, guys that you're accustomed to throwing to. And now you have new guys like Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas Jr. as well. But all I'm asking is, you just play within yourself. So, yeah, limit the turnovers, limit the fumbles, have that internal clock go off where if it goes off, get rid of the football, all that stuff. But to me, I just put it under the umbrella of play within yourself.
Yeah, that's that, and I agree with you, by the way. I think that they go hand in hand because his mistakes have come when he's trying to do too much. We've had so many conversations about this. I think that's a little bit of his flaw right now, is trying to make a play. And I think that's an edge, right? That's a fine line to walk, because you want to be the guy that's making plays. And sometimes those plays come from broken down plays and extending plays, but then your mistakes also come from there. So I think it's, it works both ways. In fact, I was thinking of this the other day. Tom Brady, of all the great plays that he has made, or the wins, or the consistency, and obviously the Super Bowls that make him the GOAT, does a play or two or three jump out to you from Tom Brady? Like when you roll back the great players, Tiger Woods, there's shots. Michael Jordan, there's dunks or big shots and clutch. Is there that for you for Tom Brady? Because I was kind of having a tough time going through those, Austin, and it proved to me that you don't have to be making the SportsCenter top 10 highlight play Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes to actually be successful.
Yeah, while it might be hard to think of like a lot of top 10 plays per se. I mean, to me, the game, and it's just an accumulation of plays, but when you're down 27-3 to Atlanta and you rally your team to come back and win that football game, in the Super Bowl, that to me is the biggest moment of his career.
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot of big moments, obviously playing that many Super Bowls, you're going to have those moments. But to me, like if you're going to point to like one moment that makes, that kind of antithesis what Tom Brady is as a football player, I think that game right there against the Falcons is that game.
Yeah, that's a good call, but that's the way I think of it too. And I think that kind of speaks to, what I'm talking about. Like, you don't have to be. You can take your medicine and be great. Like you can fold them, know when to hold them, and be great. And Brady was so good at that. And listen, everybody's got their throw or catch. I'm not telling you never made this unbelievable throw that doesn't stick out in people's mind. Obviously, around here, 3rd and 17 sticks out. And then the touchdown in the fourth quarter, those plays stick out for Jags fans. But you get the idea. The point of it is, in today's world, we're looking at Mahomes, behind the back, no look, all this stuff. Lamar Jackson, look at him escape, look at that play. Like, you're almost heralded for that play more than you are for consistency and sometimes even winning. I think that's kind of the edge, the fine line that Trevor has to find. Honestly, we don't care if he's on top 10 SportsCenter plays. He's got such a good arm that you're going to make some Martineau, Favre, Aaron Rodgers kind of throws just because his arm's so good and his arm talent's there. So that can be the highlight, and that's fine enough as long as there isn't the low light with too many fumbles. And I just think if he gets that part out of his game, I think there are so many other boxes that check in a positive way, Austin, plus the continuity of the offense, what they've built around him, how they're going to help him out this year, from under center to mixing it up to the shotgun to ability to go deep and different levels of the field, and he can make all these throws. He can use his legs. Like, I just really feel like his path to being elite is just to limit those fumbles and mistakes, not the interceptions. If he throws some interceptions, I'm cool with that overall. Obviously, when they come, how often they come is going to be part of the story. But I really think it's very simple when it comes to Trevor. I think he's on the verge if he can figure out the fumbling problem.
Yeah, and I agree. And you know what? I think as a Jaguars fan, like, obviously you want to have a top 5 quarterback, right? Well, right now Trevor Lawrence isn't there yet. I have to say that he can't be there. But I think if you look at in totality of what the career of Trevor Lawrence has been so far, and you want to, knock him for some things, like you said, it's the fumbles, it's the decisions to hang on the ball too long, it's the ball security, if you will. Those problems can be fixed. It'd be one thing if we're sitting here talking about, man, the decision making, the errant throws, the bad throws in the double, triple coverage. Like, yeah, he's had a couple of those, but nothing where it's really become like a repetitive problem. The only problem is obviously the pocket awareness, the internal clock, and fumbling the football. Those things I feel like can be addressed a little bit, as opposed to having a quarterback who throws all these bad throws, these bad interceptions, where it's like, man, do we have to look someplace else in the draft? Like, that's not the case at all. And obviously he got his new paycheck because of it. So, yeah, like, overall, does it play better? Absolutely. Do we need to see a top 8 quarterback? Yeah, that would help. But I think he has all the intangibles to do that. And once again, just cleaning up the issues of in the pocket, which can definitely be done.
Hamby's Burner says, who's going to guard Evan Ingram? That's the question. I feel like he's the X factor due to matchup issues. And, that's a good call. I think Ingram is. Here's what I would add to that. Ingram at 8 yards a catch probably isn't that worrisome or as worrisome as you'd want him to be if he was at 12 yards a catch for defenses. So I think the key to Ingram this year is, first of all, we know he's not going to catch 114 passes. It's just very unlikely. But can he extend the field? I think that's the part of the game they're working on with Ingram. And in this offense, not really an Ingram thing. It's really an offensive scheme thing, how they want to utilize him and save some more of the check downy stuff. Yeah, to Ingram when needed, but also to an ETN or others. So, yeah, I think Ingram is a mismatch problem, and I think we saw that in the Atlanta game and the final preseason game, but we've seen it for a couple of years. We know that's why he doesn't come off the field, because he is a mismatch problem. But, all right, a lot good going on in the NFL, a lot good going on here in Jacksonville inside Jags headquarters. Austen Lane, we talked a little bit earlier about this game, Jags and Dolphins. I can't remember being this excited for an opener in a while, not necessarily because of what the Jags might be able to do or who they have, because that's always a cautionary tale, even if you feel good about the team. I'm just talking about the entertainment value in this football game. I think this might be one of the most fun football games the Jags play all year, and it just happens to open the season.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, listen, we all love offense, and it should be at a high dosage this Sunday in Miami. So I agree with you. I'm very intrigued for this matchup. And once again, I think it comes down to is, can this Jaguars offense keep up with this Miami offense? And that's going to be the biggest question mark. And this is going to stem right back to your identity, this Doug Peterson-led team who has to be great at offense, who has to get the best out of Trevor Lawrence. There's a lot to like, and once again, if you're a fan of fantasy football, I think you're going to like it as well.
Let's listen to Doug Peterson talking about this week. They hit the practice field yesterday, day off today. You got to get a day off in there, and then really tomorrow things will ramp up. But they've been looking at the Miami Dolphins for a couple weeks. You get a head start. Dolphins doing the same for the Jacksonville Jaguars. They've got probably a good plan put together for Miami. Now they'll have to go execute it. Here's Doug on Monday talking about this week.
You want to compete against the best, and sure, preseason is one thing, but now it's the regular season, and you're going to get everybody's best, and we're going to put our best foot forward. So great opportunity for our guys, for our defense, and for our team to compete this coming weekend.
Yeah, and everybody that talked in the last couple of days and will continue the next couple of days is mentioning how Miami is a playoff contender, right? People feel really good about the Dolphins, and that's what it keeps coming back to for me. And I'll just reiterate, since everybody's ears are perked up a little bit more now that we're on the horizon to the season, my mentality about this team, Austen, the entire offseason, really the last few weeks, as you get to watch the Jags play, you can get excited about a lot of things. I think the Jaguars are a pretty good football team. My concern is I think the league is as good as it's been in a long time in totality, and I think the AFC is even more so. I think there are 11 teams probably in the AFC that think if things go well, they could go to a Super Bowl. I think there are only like 2 or 3 teams that probably would say, we're not that good and won't be in the mix. And keep in mind, when that happened last year, Houston was probably one of those teams, and look what they did. They won the AFC South. That's just the nature of the NFL. So that's my issue with the Jags in 2024. It's not their issue. I think they're going to be okay. I think the rest of the league is so damn good.
Yeah, listen, if you want to go to the Super Bowl, go on a playoff run, first and foremost, you got to win your division. Or you got to at least be competitive in your division. And we've talked about this before a little bit, but yes, the AFC is super competitive, but the AFC South in general, I feel like is pretty damn competitive. You have the Houston Texans, who are kind of the AFC South darlings. They're the toast of the AFC South, and rightfully so. And until proven otherwise, they've had the best quarterback this past year. They probably have the most offensive firepower. And, their coach, even though he's young, seems to be doing like a pretty damn good job. You have the Colts where, they bring back essentially the entire roster that won, 9 games last year. That was just outside the playoff race. And now, once again, the biggest unknown is Anthony Richardson of, can he propel them to more wins? Is he going to be the guy that all the quote-unquote fantasy experts are thinking that he's going to be. So the Colts could be pretty competitive. And then obviously the Titans, you know how I feel about it. Shout out to Furniture Source. I'm still sleeping on you a little bit, but they keep they're quietly adding quality players. Like maybe players past their prime a little bit, like Jamal Adams, a classic example. Like I forgot he's on the Tennessee Titans. I saw the roster a couple days ago.
Yeah.
And then they bring the cornerback from Kansas City. Can't think of his name now.
Yeah, Snead.
Snead, thank you very much. Yeah, so they add Snead to it. So yeah, even the Titans, like in some areas, you like what you see there. So I think it's going to be a super competitive division, and obviously you're going to get a good start against the Miami Dolphins to see kind of what you have as a team. But you know what it comes down to, Brent? You got to win those divisional games.
Yeah, you have to do. Listen, they went 4-2 in the division last year. The problem is they didn't do the other side of the formula. The formula is also to win at home. So you've got to be on the plus side, I think, in the division and at home to really punch your ticket and feel good about it. The Jags have to do both things this year. They've got to be better at home. If they're better at home, I think the division will take care of itself. Trevor's going to stuff the beads in Ramsey's mouth. Is Joe Tessitore going to call that if that happens? That's one of the comments today. So I go back. I keep I'm leaning on this right now, and so now I've really looked it up. Most exciting season opener. It doesn't have to be at home. I'm not talking about home opener, but season opener since. That's the question out there. What would you say is the last time maybe you were this excited about a season opener and the matchup? Because the Jags have often played Houston and Indianapolis. So like, okay, that's kind of a boring matchup because you see it a couple times a year and you always get it. Well, I was not wrong, I think, with 2019. I think all the hype around Foles and the money spent and everything else. And, okay, it was a great 17. It was a bad 18. But now look at, we got Nick Foles. He won a Super Bowl. Where's this going to go? And obviously it didn't go. But that game against Kansas City, I think, had a lot of hype. Like on that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I think people were pretty excited about it. And it was at home. Before that, the New York Giants were the year before, but I don't really remember it like hyped up anything crazy. But I guess it would have been, now that I'm thinking about it, Austin, because that would have been coming off 17. So you're going, there was just so much buzz. I think the amount of season tickets they sold, everybody had their Super Bowl plans that year. And so they were going to play the Giants. There must have been a lot of buzz. They won that game 20-15. And then the other one I'll go to is 2016. I think that was Gus Bradley's last year against the Green Bay Packers. That was a good football game here in Jacksonville, but Aaron Rodgers and Green Bay able to win it in the end. So those are some examples of recent or somewhat recent season openers that really caught your attention, maybe more than others. I think this one does the same, is really the moral of the story.
No, without a doubt, because you got to feel like if you can be competitive against Miami, and once again, it's hard to tell who a team's going to be week one, and we see this every single year in the NFL. There's some teams that we put on a pedestal that end up not being that great, and there's some teams that we overlook that end up going on to the playoffs and maybe making a run. So it's like that every single year. But we can all agree that we think Miami could be one of those teams who could go to the playoffs and who have one of the best offenses in the NFL. So if that's the case, then you got to ask yourself, okay, new defense, what is it going to look like? Is Ryan Nielsen going to come out right away and showcase, listen, I understand maybe there were some things in the preseason in terms of stopping the run, the interior play, that were some questions. The linebacking play may be a little bit in question. This is a good opportunity to come out and solidify yourself and say, I know what I'm doing. This Jaguars defense is going to be fine. Then on the other side, this is a game where, in the past, the Dolphins defense has been a little bit vulnerable, where you can kind of build Trevor's confidence a little bit, and we can finally see this offense click like it's supposed to click.
Yeah, we're getting a question about some matchups. Austin's Boston's and Random Vid says, go Jags. Let's hear about some key matchups to secure this one. We've already talked about some things. Like, obviously, Trevor, one of our big talking points is, can he hold on to the football? If he does that, he has a chance to be, we think, elite. The matchup that's really fun is Brian Thomas Jr., first-round pick against Jalen Ramsey. I think the expectation has to be settled at a certain point. But we talked about it. Can a big play happen with Brian Thomas Jr., just even one, or maybe it's two, and that would be a resounding win for the Jags, especially if Jalen's on him a lot of the time. Hamby's Burner says, last year, Darby Hill, Tyreek to one catch for 8 yards. That's the second time we've got that comment, and that's another part of this, right? The Jags secondary against those two guys, Waddle and Tyreek Hill, assuming Waddle's healthy and goes, which I think he will be, but we'll get more on that tomorrow and Thursday, of course. But we asked earlier, is the defensive front of the Jags more important, or is it the secondary? I think people would lean toward the secondary, especially how quick Tua gets the football out of his hands. So those are some of the matchups that we already did talk about. We'll continue to talk about even more of them, break this down every which way going into Sunday's matchup, 1 o'clock on CBS 47. There's another part of this, though, because you keep saying run the ball, run the ball. That's what you want to write up there in your little bubble. And you think the Jags are going to run the ball more. I've been raving about the fact that the Jags are going to go out from under center a little bit more. I think that will change their offense and help them with the explosive plays and maybe the power game as well. The Dolphins were pretty good last year against the run. Now, that's last year. I think it's dangerous to work off last year's stuff. But they were pretty good, Austin. 3.8 yards per carry last season, which was good for like fifth in the National Football League. So what do you think about the Jags' chances to do what you want them to do, run the ball?
Yeah, I mean, I think the chances are great. I think with the emergence of Tank Bigsby now, too, that kind of gives you a little bit of a different look. You know, he's more of the downhill runner, going to lower the shoulder, deliver punishment. Yeah, I think if you can get him going and then establish that play action, get Travis Etienne going, too, on the corners and use his speed, I think they can definitely be successful here, Brent. And once again, we've said this many times. And if they can do that, that'll open up things downfield for Trevor Lawrence, that play action under center. And then all of a sudden you really be cooking. Like we've seen in the past with these Doug Peterson offenses of when they're firing all cylinders, whether it's in Philly, we've seen a little bit in Jacksonville as well. But we've seen it where it's almost like pick your poison, you know, where it's almost like they're playing man. It's like, anything that we do is going to work. And you get to that point, once again, can't say it enough, Brent, by running the football.
Yeah, and so the matchup there is going to be interesting. Everybody talks about their offense. Here's what they do have on that side of the ball, okay? Zach Sealer was with Baltimore. Benito Jones. Calais is there, obviously now 38 years old, but Calais had a nice season last year still. Jalen Phillips coming off the Achilles. David Long, they get from Tennessee, right? Good player. Jordan Brooks. And they drafted Chop Robinson. The thought about Chop Robinson now, at least McDaniel was critical of him in the preseason. I remember one soundbite talking about his inability to stop the run. So if he's in the game, maybe they can go after him a little bit in the run game. But it's not a front that strikes crazy fear into you. Their secondary is really their playmaking part. They got Kendall Fuller, Jordan Poyer from Buffalo, Javon Holland, and obviously Jalen. So to me, that's the better part of their defense, Austin, at least with a guy like Bradley Chubb out for this game. Do you agree? And therefore, maybe that's more reason to actually hand the ball off.
Yes, yeah, I absolutely do agree. And once again, like their secondary, they're not like, you know, they're unstoppable by any means, but you're going to make things a lot easier on yourselves if you can run the football and establish last scrimmage. Because once again, and kind of echoing to what we talked about when the show started here, this is a game where you want to control the clock. I don't want to get into a track meet with the Miami Dolphins. All right, like, yeah, I get it. The offense, we have a lot of weapons as well, right? But I don't want to go against Tyreek Hill if Jalen Waddle plays, Mostert, and then Etienne as well. Like, don't want to go against those guys in a track meet. I would much rather control the time of possession, establish the run, and then just kind of, bleed the clock out, if you will. And they have all the capabilities, I feel like, against this Miami Dolphins defensive line to do that.
Yeah, YB400 says Dolphins defensive line isn't like our defensive linemen that our offensive linemen go up against in practice. I think the Jags have the edge there, no doubt. Will that help the offensive line of the Jags? We will find out. Can the Jags lean on this run game a little bit and open things up with play action? That's going to be the plan to be able to do that. But this is a obviously, it's a somewhat favorable opportunity to go against the Miami Dolphins defense. It's not like you're going up against the Ravens defense or one that you think is going to be super elite. Miami is built on their offense for the most part, and I'm not trying to degrade their defense. It's not bad. I just don't think it's going to be the better part of their football team. And there's one other thing. Anthony Weaver comes over as a new defensive coordinator, so he's in a new spot. And Miami has to get a little bit used to that. So the Jags are doing that with Nielsen. The Dolphins are doing that too with Weaver. And we'll see how that part plays out. Man, there's a lot of games within a game in this contest, and two coaches that are offensive minded. I will always say this, and I do this in this matchup too, and that's what I come away with. Most often than not, I feel good about the Jags head coach and the Jags quarterback in a matchup. And I do think that's the case in this one. Listen, McDaniel comes with a lot of flavor, and a lot of people love him. The Jags have the guy that's won the Lombardi. He's a good coach. And I'd take Trevor over Tua. So I try to dumb this thing down to really simplify it, and I know it's more than that. But I like that part for the Jacksonville Jaguars going into this football game. And will that be enough? Will it be enough to convince me that they can beat the Dolphins on the road in week one? We'll see.